Good evening. My name is Pooja Sagar, and I'm part of the organizing team of this festival. On behalf of Indian Institute for Human Settlements, I welcome you all to City Scripts. This year, City Scripts becomes 9 years old, and this festival is possible because of the wonderful support of the people of Bangalore who have been regularly coming to our festival since we started. So thank you all for your wonderful support. We are happy to present once again a wonderful lineup of speakers, exhibitions, and workshops this year. So the opening session is an author conversation with Karthik Venkatesh on his new book, which is called 10 Indian Languages and How They Came to Be. He will be in conversation with author and journalist Amandeep Sandhu, and the book traces the cultural shifts and political and social influences that have shaped 10 Indian languages. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Let me read a little bit about them. Karthik Venkatesh is an executive editor with Penguin Random House India, where he commissions and edits fiction and non-fiction. He's also a writer, and his articles have been featured in several publications like The Hindu, Mint, Lounge, Deccan Herald, The Federal, and several other publications. His first book, titled 10 Indian Languages and How They Came to Be, is meant for young adults and published by Duckbill in February 2024. Amandeep Sandhu, born in Roorkela, Odisha, resides in Bangalore. He has authored the novels Sepia Leaves and Roll of Honor, and nominated for the Hindu Prize in 2013. In 2019, Sandhu published Punjab Journeys Through Fault Lines, published by Westland, longlisted for the NIF Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay Award 2020, and shortlisted for the Atagalata BLF Non-Fiction Prize for 2020. His other works include the ebook Bravado to Fear to Abandonment, Mental Health and COVID-19 Lockdown, and contributions to anthologies, magazines, websites like Caravan, Scroll, and The Hindu. Sandhu was a fellow at the Academy Schloss Solitude 2013-2015 and is currently a Homi Baba Fellow working on a book tentatively titled The Outliers, 6 Who Live Outside Punjab in India. Thank you so much, and over to the speakers.
Hear this mic? I have it. Oh, okay. Is this better? Yeah, this I can hear. Yeah, so I don't know how it happened that we became the inaugural session of this festival, and that is always an honor, It's like, wow, we are the first session, we are the opening ones, But when I learned of it, I thought that how beautifully our session actually falls with the theme of the festival. Text and tapestry, knots, loops, stitches, and tangles. Everything applies to language. Now, tapestry is about cloth, especially about clothes with pictures. And today we shall see how text is also a tapestry. Pooja, who leads the word lab at IIHS, is the host of the festival. She recently said we started thinking of text as object that was woven together where threads of the past and present intersect. We ran with this and picked up everything else that fits in, which you will see in the next 2 days. Text as an object woven together is basically weaving. And weaving means warp and weft. And I'm happy to share that both of us here are examples of warp and weft. I'll explain how. Karthik was born in Kolkata in a Tamil family, identifies both as Tamil and Malayali. Grew up on an intersection of languages in Bangalore, Kannada, Dakkani, English, Hindi, Telugu. Married a Sikh from Punjab, learned Punjabi and ran a school in rural Punjab for a decade. I was born in Rourkela, Odisha in a Punjabi family. Grew up in an intersection of languages, Odia, Hindi, English, Bengali. Married a Malayali. Having stitched the nation with our linguistics lives, we both live in Bangalore now. Ask us our identity. Who are we? And that is exactly what the book intends to do. This book looks little, like honestly, I was telling Karthik yesterday, that when I finished reading it, I said, there should be 100 pages more. Where are those 100 pages, you know? But then it is a book written for young adults. And what beautifully comes out, and we'll ask him later, is did he write as a teacher? Did he write as a father to teens, teenage sons, you know? Or did he write as an amateur? Now, currently amateur is sort of like somebody who doesn't have skills. But the original meaning of amateur is somebody who loves, you know, who loves an art, a form, a thing. And he is that way a lover of not only languages, but also cricket and sports, you know. So we should look this evening at a book of Indian languages to ask ourselves about this assumption that we make that somebody who comes from somewhere is fixed in their linguistic identity. And to open with, let me ask Karthik, see, there is another game going on here, and that is that, you know, he is my editor as well. So I will put him to a little bit of rough spot later. But what about these bilingual districts?
I'm from a bilingual district.
Yeah. So how do we categorize this as this state or that state? You know, like
You ideally shouldn't, but you know, but the state has done that. You know, whether it's Palakkad in Kerala, Nagarkoil in Tamil Nadu, Belgaum in Karnataka, Bidar in Karnataka, and there are many others. You know, districts say on the border of Bihar, on Bengal and Odisha, for instance, or even Jharkhand and Bengal. There, lot of these districts are bilingual. You know, they could be either. You could move the border and they kind of fit in the other state. But when linguistic states were created, you know, you had to draw the border, and you push them one way or the other, and you kind of fix their identity, right? More or less like when religion was fixed when the British started the census of India, right? People in their religious practices in India have followed more than one religious practice. It's not uncommon. We see it even today, right? But then you had to choose. You could either be this or you could be that. Or the British said you are this. You know, whether you thought you were this or you thought you were that, or actually you probably thought you were both. But the British said, no, you can't. You are either this or that. Similarly, language identities are also fixed by, you know, linguistic state borders. And so that's how the cookie crumbled, essentially.
Has it crumbled? I don't know. No, like, so what are so are the state boundaries in some ways the equivalent of the rows and columns of a census sheet?
In some sense, you're forced to choose identities when you fall, you know, within the boundary of a certain state, and that is, I'm guessing, to an extent limiting. You know, just like identifying with a religion is in some sense limiting when you want to be more diverse in your practice. And nobody will stop you from being more diverse in your practice, at least not yet. But still, when you categorize, when you choose, when you're forced to, you know, when you're slotted, you know, it does, a certain clipping of wings does take place.
Because the line cuts both ways. I mean,
absolutely.
Any line will cut both ways.
Absolutely.
But I think the worst is when somebody has boxed you somewhere, and then you are having to defend that position, you know, which happens very often nowadays.
So even when George A. Grierson, who did the Linguistic Survey of India, when he mentioned this, even as he was doing it, he said, I could easily move the border 20 kilometers this way or 20 kilometers that way, and said, this is where this language is spoken. I could increase the border, I could decrease the border, and nothing much would change. You know, it's not as if people who live on this side of the border speak a language and people on that side of the border speak a completely different language. There is a certain gray area where people speak, you know, a mix of both. They speak both. And they just live between.
Would that be a Creole of sorts, or what would we call it? I mean, in terms of linguistics, what would we call it?
I mean, I'm not sure whether you should call it anything at all. See, no language is pure in that sense. Language, even the language identifiably something, Kannada or Tamil or Malayalam, they change over a geographical area, right? It's when the change is very, very identifiable, very, very noticeable, then you start wondering what language is this. But Hubli Kannada is still Kannada. Mysore Kannada is still Kannada. right? But there is a difference. There's a fair bit of difference. So this fixing of linguistic identity, this fixing of a certain kind of standard language is a product of printing. When printing came into the picture, right, you had to have a standard language, you had to have standard spellings, you more or less identified certain grammatical forms as standard. That being the case, then everything that did not conform to the standard became non-standard, right? And therein things became more complicated than they perhaps were earlier.
So what I'm hearing really is that whether it is state boundaries or census or printing now, there is an intervention of technology in behavior, in how people live. And that is actually shifting our understanding of who these people are. So technology, which is, it's
Technology enables, technology disables.
it's typical like is light wave or particle, like you can't find out. So that's what is happening here, that as soon as you come under observation, you change.
Yeah,
Or
I guess you could say
come under
that.
boxing, you change, like in a census. Or you come under printing, and printing has been so instrumental in, and we'll have a question on that, on how languages with scripts differ from languages without scripts. Like there are millions of languages, very few are with scripts. And why do they have a hegemony? Okay, let's start with that question. Why do the languages which have scripts consider themselves, oh, I am language? Others are dialects, so why does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, why does that happen? It's a question I think we should all ask ourselves. This hegemony of languages, some languages are purer. What does that mean? Languages are languages. Languages were originally evolved in spoken form. They were originally evolved for communication between people. At some point of time, scripts and other printing, etc., came into the picture and complicated the situation somewhat. And then, because I think formal education came into the picture, right? So you could only teach languages with scripts, right? Then, so certain languages became a higher up in the hierarchy. Certain languages were demoted, and nobody demoted them per se. Nobody gave a memo, right? People demoted them on their own. This language has a script. This language is a medium of education. So this is inherently superior to a language which does not have a script or is not the medium of education. It's just an automatic reordering of the world in the minds of the people.
I'll just differ with the word automatic. It is very deliberate.
Gradual.
because this is where power comes into play. I mean, like whether a king or a state patronizes a language. For example, Karnataka. Now there is Tulu, there is Kodava, there's Konkani, there's Upper Karnataka Kannada, and there is Mysore Kannada. And all those guys feel, well, why is this Mysore Kannada the main Kannada here? Like why is other Kannadas not equal, or other languages equally, So, and that is because the Language Commission decided in 1956 that this is the language.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
so the role of power
powers is critical. It is critical, absolutely. And why is Bundelkhandi Hindi not the standard form of Hindi? Some other form of Hindi is the standard form of Hindi, right?
Right.
So it's just chance. In an alternate universe, another form of the language could be the standard. If that region had the political power.
But now the region which gets political power, whose language gets established, they start calling the shots because we are in a democracy, and they are the ones who are getting the largesse of the state. They are getting the benefits from the state. They are getting, and the other ones who are smaller, like what comes to mind is tribes, for example. Or you have Santali in the book. We can talk about that,
See, this is all a working of what we call Murphy's Golden Sengol rule. He who has the golden Sengol makes the rules, right? It's the Indian version of Murphy's Golden rule.
Yeah, Murphy's Golden Sengol rule.
He who has the gold makes the rules, but
Yeah.
in India we have a Sengol, right?
But that's inherently wrong, Like, for example, the Santals. I mean, they occupy so much area, Bihar, Jharkhand,
Across
Odisha,
4 or 5 states.
4 or 5 states, but they have no political capital. Would you like to talk about that?
Now, Santali, which is one of the languages I spoke about in my book, has roughly, 7.5 million speakers as per the 2011 census, but it's not a state language, right? Whereas a language like Konkani or Manipuri, which have far smaller number of speakers, are state languages, right? Why does Santali not have that status? Because its speakers are distributed across Orissa, Bengal, Jharkhand, Bihar, parts of Chhattisgarh. They're not the majority anywhere, right? And then so, no, the what can I say? The rules being that the speakers of a certain language in a certain area get to constitute a state, right? These people have kind of fallen between 4 or 5 states, and therein lies the rub. Though, to be honest, to be fair, the government of India has tried to right that wrong by including Santali in the scheduled languages. They did this about 20 odd years ago. So some attempt has been made to right that wrong.
But does that mean that their textbooks are made, it is taught in schools?
That process has started.
And recruitment happens on the basis of your knowledge of Santali?
Yeah, that process has started, but then Santali has to compete now, say, in Odisha with Odia, or in the Hindi states with Hindi, and in the greater Indian region with English, right? So it is fighting a very, very uphill battle. It is difficult. It is difficult in many ways. If a Santali residing in Odisha learns in Santali, right? But to get a state government job, he or she would have to know Odia, for instance.
Like the writer you mentioned, Hansda, he's Santali, but he writes in English.
English, yeah.
Or another friend of ours, Jacinta, she's Santali, but she writes in Hindi.
Hindi.
So when will they write in Santali?
There are others writing in Santali, and a good example would be the Rajasthani writer Vijaydan Deta, who used to write in Hindi, but gave it up specifically, for political and social reasons, cultural reasons, to write in Rajasthani. And he has, achieved considerable success in the sense that he's recognized as someone who made a very deliberate choice to write in Rajasthani as opposed to writing in standard Hindi. So when sometimes people take stands like that, people, break new ground by doing things like that, then perhaps, suddenly things might change.
But he won the big award before that or after that?
No, he stopped writing in Hindi at a very early age. He began his career writing in Hindi, but switched to Rajasthani.
So let's come to a language like Marathi, partly because it is connected with Tamil Nadu also. But I was surprised to read in the book that the Yadavas were from Karnataka. What was that? What is that about?
That's a story, yeah.
Because the parallel to Santali that we were talking about is a Yadav guy traveling with me in a car to Delhi and saying, we are about 8-10 crore people in this country. I mean, the Yadav big caste, there must be sub-castes under it. We can actually form governments, but we are not united. So, but they are from Karnataka? What is that?
They are also from Karnataka. They are also from Tamil Nadu. And they are from across the country. There have been attempts to...
How does that happen? I mean, Mulayam Singh Yadav and Lalu Yadav. These are the two guys as Yadavas, so how are they linked to South India? I don't get it.
I mean, they're here. They're here. They identify as one thing or the other, Tamilian, Kannadiga, whatever.
This is the rub he would give me when editing me, Explain this to me, please. No, but then Marathi also is actually, if I got it right, when we are talking about power determines language, Marathi became a language which went the reverse way. The people's language, the rulers adopted.
Yeah, originally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So talk about that.
Yeah. So the Shatavahanas, right, among the earliest Marathi inscriptions found were under the rule of the Shatavahanas, who were originally from Andhra. They were originally called the Andhras, but the Shatavahana capital was in Pathan, which is today in Maharashtra. And they adopted the language of the people, and eventually at some point of time, they stopped talking about where they were from. They became a Marathi dynasty. So that happened. But that's not the only example. The most interesting example in this respect is Krishnadevaraya, who is from the Tuluva dynasty. He's actually a Tulu, right? But he ruled from Hampi in Vijayanagar. And the two languages there were Telugu and Kannada. Right? Telugu was the language of the court, and Krishnadevaraya himself was a Telugu writer, but he also patronized Kannada. So
Tulu man, a Telugu writer, and patronized Kannada.
Kannada too,
Wow.
apart from Telugu. So he's a very interesting example, a more recent example. The Shatavahanas were several centuries earlier, 5th, 6th century, but Krishnadevaraya is about 500 years ago.
But what is the relation to Tanjavur? To the Marathi language to Tanjavur?
So the Marathas came down south. Till about 1850, Tanjore had a Marathi king. They had conquests in various parts of South India. And so Marathi was spoken in various parts of South India. It's still spoken in Tanjore. Many Marathi speakers live there. And they speak an older version of Marathi, which has some fundamental differences with the Marathi spoken in Maharashtra. It's an older version. The language has changed in Maharashtra, but the change did not reach Tanjore. Plus the influence of Tamil. So it's a different Marathi.
I'm asking this in particular because of the dominance of the Tamil identity, and then here you learn that Marathi has come in so far into you, and then what? Karnataka came in between? What happened? They shrunk back? What happened?
No, the most interesting thing about the whole Marathi and Tanjore connection is Marathi is historically written in 2 scripts. Now it's written in Devanagari, but till about 1950, Marathi was written also in a script called Modi, which is similar to Devanagari. But the greatest collection of Modi manuscripts is in Tanjore. It is not in Maharashtra. Right? The Saraswati Mahal library in Tanjore has a huge collection of old Marathi manuscripts, even today. And it's well preserved, and scholars come and study them, and so on and so forth. So the Marathi connection with Tanjore is very deep.
And also Sambar? Was it also invented?
Apparently a Marathi contribution to southern cuisine.
Tamil folk
from
might
what I've
start
read.
feeling insecure about what all they have, like so, Yeah, we talked briefly about languages with or without script, but one of the languages you talk about in the book, is Kokborok.
Kokborok, yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about that. Tell us about how did it grow in Tripura and became state language? And
so Kokborok is spoken in Tripura. Roughly 1 million people speak Kokborok in India and Bangladesh, and it's more than 1,000 years old. There are very old inscriptions, etc., in Kokborok. Roughly from the 15th century onwards, what you notice in the history is that Kokborok stops being the language of power because the kings of Tripura start patronizing Bengali. Right? So Bengali becomes the language of Tripura. And Kokborok still remains a spoken language. Kokborok still remains a language spoken by the people, but it does not have state patronage anymore. And then around the late 19th century, right, Kokborok starts to, the people essentially start to revive the language. That was a renaissance that happened all across Indian languages, right? All Indian languages you see, post 1850, 1860, 1870, you see new forms of literature come into the language, the novel, the drama, etc., all Western influenced. So Kokborok participated in that renaissance, so to speak. And the language then comes back into play. It takes for far longer, unlike say Kannada, Tamil, Marathi, etc., which gain ground very quickly. Kokborok takes far longer. Kokborok is also hampered by the fact that post-partition, Tripura becomes a Bengali majority state. Kokborok speakers become a minority. And so in the last 20, 25 years, Kokborok has made some, sterling efforts to kind of revive itself. Academically, it has become a language where taught at the BA and the MA level. It's still written in 2 scripts. It's written in the Bengali script. It's also written in the Roman script. That puzzle has not yet been sorted out. I think in the schools run by the hill councils, which are autonomous hill councils in Tripura, Kokborok is taught in the Roman script. But in the schools run by the Tripura state government, it's still taught in the Bengali script. So that puzzle hasn't been sorted out yet. But still, it has made, considerable headway. And to do that in this time, when it's threatened by English and Bengali, I think is commendable. It's a great example of a language coming back into the picture.
I can't hold too many things. I'm loud enough, no? Okay. No. I wanted to show you, I mean, what I loved in the book is that there are these things as well, you know. There are pictorial, and it's full of it. Yeah, just hold me the mic. Hold me the mic. Yeah. You know, like every chapter almost has how the script is written. You know, I was like so happy to see Shahmukhi, which is one of the ways in which Punjabi is written, was captured in the book. And then it's not only captured like this is a script, this is how it is written in, you know, the Nastalic version, but this is also how a word is formed around it. So it's very rich. I mean, it's not just text. The second part which I loved in the book is that almost every chapter has a box item, like, you know, and this was very innovative. So there are 3 texts here instead of 1. There is a pictorial text, there is a box text, and then there is a text which he is talking about. Plus, then every chapter ends with a timeline of the language. So, I mean, I was looking at it and I wanted to ask you even about the process of writing. I'm shifting a little bit. We'll come back to, I have the question planted. How did you write this book? You know, because, because
You're making it far more complicated than it was. You're making it was far easier, I assure you.
book writing is very complicated for me. I die writing, you know, like, and this book, you know, there is something you do with text, you know, like anybody here who writes, they hold a fact, they tell the fact, and then they dwell upon the fact, and then they shift perspective on the fact, and then they connect to the next thing. Now, you can't do that in a young adult book. It has to be brief, it has to be succinct, it has to make the point, and it has to move on to the next point. So how did you hold back? I mean, did the editor in you come into play even while you were writing, or did you cut it out later?
No, I was for 10 years, I used to teach history and English, right? So what was always on my mind was students falling asleep and I would be talking. And that's exactly what I wanted to avoid.
So that was the question I initially outlined, you know. Was it the teacher in you? Was it the father of teens in you?
Absolutely.
It was the teacher in you.
Yeah, my boys don't listen to me at all. My students were forced to listen to me, but they'd fall asleep involuntarily. So,
So you knew where to cut it. You know?
I tried.
Okay, after that sort of interlude, now you said that the Tripura kings turned to Bangla. There's an interesting thing here. They turned to Bangla, or were they of another religion and they turned to Hindu religion? Why did that happen? Because that happens in Manipur. You know, so the Manipur story is about that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I went to Manipur last year, I was like astounded by the fact that the Bangla Vaishnavites had taken not only their cultural sensibility, but even the religious sensibilities, and they went and burnt the original manuscripts of the language and imposed the language on them. So that
No,
tussle.
in Tripura, I think there is enough evidence of Hindu-Buddhist influence from more than 1,000 years ago. So I think they were both, you know, and Bengali was really a linguistic choice, not perhaps that much influenced by religion. That's my reading, but I could be wrong.
No, but there's a Tripura Devi. I mean, like, she's like an ancient figure.
Yes. So it appears to be a linguistic move, not so much a religious move, unlike Manipur.
So what happens in Manipur?
So in Manipur in 1700 or thereabouts, the king turns Vaishnava, and the old religion of Manipur, right, which is now called Sanamahi. It's not clear what they themselves called it earlier, right? So Sanamahi is kind of pushed into the background, and it's not done quietly. It's done very violently. So Sanamahi is pushed into the background. Vaishnavism becomes the state religion, and all traces of the old culture are, at least the attempt is made to wipe them out. You know, like this is day 0 now. Going forward, this is how it's going to be. Though obviously nothing gets wiped out. The old practices remain. Some of the old texts remain. But now today the quarrel is about what is an authentic old text and what is not. No, and that's not going to be easy to resolve. But yeah, in Manipur, that's how things moved.
No, also why I brought in Manipur is that initially when ethnic violence started there, it was portrayed as a religious violence, temples versus churches, how many are being burnt, but there is just 200 years back, there is this story. It is a tribal ethnic fight. It is not a religious fight. Temples stand for a certain thing and churches stand for a certain thing, though they are attacked. But the fight was not actually about religion, like for example, now in Manipur also it's very, I think we need a historian from Manipur to tell us whether it was in the valley or was it also in the hills around.
Hills, yeah. It's not clear.
Yeah,
It's
because
not
the
clear.
hills around are
Different.
Are different. I mean, there are Nagas there and there are Kukis there. So the Nagas converted towards Christianity, when the British reached there. Kukis didn't convert, so they remain practicing animists in some ways. Some are Buddhists. So it's always a conflict.
Very complicated situation.
Very complicated. No, it is. But let's go jump another hill there, because in the Northeast, you just jump a hill and you're in a new region. Nagaland. I was fascinated by this language called Nagamese. What is that?
So Nagamese is a language that is essentially a mix of the Naga languages, which are about 25, 26 in number, and Assamese largely, but there are also words from Hindi, Bengali, and English as well. Nagamese was born as a result of the interaction between the Naga tribes and the Assamese. And it has become now a lingua franca of Nagaland as well. When two Nagas from different tribes talk to each other, they often talk in Nagamese. And the interesting thing is this, now Nagaland became a state in 1963, right? And the older generation of Nagas, because till 1963 it was under Assam, knew Assamese. But since 1963 it's been a separate state, so nobody knows Assamese now. Newer generations don't know Assamese now. And the question was, in the Nagaland assembly, what would be the language spoken? Right? At some point of time, Assamese stopped being understood as the old guard gave way to the new. So often, Nagamese is spoken in the state assembly because that's the one language everyone understands, though the official language of Nagaland is actually English. So English remains the official language, but practically spoken language is Nagamese, and there is even a Nagamese newspaper, right, called Nagamese Khobor. Yeah.
Khobor is Bengali.
Khobor is Bengali, Khobor is Assamese.
So, is Nagamese an Esperanto at a limited level? I mean,
no, see, the only reason why I would say Nagamese is not Esperanto, Esperanto is an artificial language, right? There are rules, someone made rules, right? Nagamese, you're making rules on the go, right? When Nagamese had to be printed for the first time in this newspaper, then some editor had to make some rules, right? If that editor changes, some other editor will make new rules. So there is no fixed grammatical form as of now. It is largely a spoken tongue.
But it's used in the assembly.
It is used in the assembly because it's the one language all the Naga tribes understand.
So you have a language spoken in the assembly which doesn't have rules.
Which is very well understood.
Wow.
That's the point. No, and when the government of India, and there's another, I mean, this story doesn't end here. When the government of India tried to give formal status to Nagamese, there was huge pushback from the Naga intellectuals. They said, what is Nagamese? It is not a marker of Naga identity. It is a bazaar language, right? It is an anti-intellectual language. So no, right now the language continues to be English. When we Nagas figure it out, we will send you an email.
And how will the Nagas figure it out? Nagas, there are 11 militia groups in Nagaland, all of them indulging in extortion. The Indian government's writ doesn't run in Nagaland at all, like though there is a formal elected government in which the ruling party is part of it. They didn't go for elections this time. 5 districts, there was 0 polling. So how would they get to do it? Like so. Now that we have talked about Santali, Nagamese, Manipuri, Kokbrok, I'm getting towards the question, and the question is that, and you could see the pattern of this talk also, like I've deliberately focused on this side, is because there's too much talk. When talk about migration happens, it's talk about the Indus Valley civilization,
Migration from the West.
From the West. But we have I've never heard talking about migration from the East.
East, yeah.
Which seems actually bigger than the West one. I mean, the kinds of people who would have come from the West might be, more, but the number of people who have come in from here seem much bigger. So anyway, that's contestable. But before we get to that, I need to understand, as if I'm your student in your classroom, what are language families? This is something I have found it very difficult to understand. Your book is in 5 parts based on the 5 language families in the Indian subcontinent. But what is language family?
So language families are, what can I say?
Why do they have these complicated big names?
Some language families are complicated, some are not. So language families essentially consist of a group of languages which are broadly similar and which linguists reckon go back to a common root, right? Like if you were to take Dravidian languages, right? Tamil, Telugu, Kannada. I am deliberately leaving out Malayalam. Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada go back to what is called Proto-Dravidian, which was a common language, right? Which is the root language, not common language, from which all 3 of them emerged, right? Malayalam later emerged from Tamil. So that means all these languages and the many other Dravidian languages that there are at least about 30 Dravidian languages, they all go back to one common language from which they have all evolved. So, and that in essence constitutes a language family. And similarly,
What would we say Tamil, Telugu, Brahui? What do they evolve from?
Proto-Dravidian.
Who spoke that?
Who spoke that? The earliest people spoke Proto-Dravidian. There is no documented existence of Proto-Dravidian. It is theoretically constructed by linguists and almost certainly existed. The Indo-Aryan languages go back to Proto-Indo-European, right? Which was originally spoken and then branched off into 10 different streams, 10 or 11 different streams, one of which is Indo-Aryan. So, and there are further subdivisions thereof.
But then these other ones, the one we are
Austroasiatic.
talking about, Austroasiatic and Sino-Tibetan.
And Sino-Tibetan, yeah. Austroasiatic is a group of languages, Santali, Khasi, right, Munda, there are plenty of those, largely spoken in eastern India, in parts of northeastern India. And Sino-Tibetan is largely, almost entirely northeastern India.
And what was this migration? Where did these people come from?
No, so if you were to look, say, at Khasi, Khasi's closest relatives are Mon, which is in Burma, and Khmer, which is in Cambodia. So the people go back there, and they came here. And then, obviously, there was a movement. Some people stayed back in Cambodia, some people stayed back in Burma, and then some people came right up to India. You can broadly make that conjecture.
It's fascinating because I've been completely unaware of them. I mean, of course, yeah, there are jokes about those people, how they look. There are cuss words about it, but I didn't know that there was a huge migration story hidden under it, like.
Yeah, and that happened.
And that must be at least better documented than the Indus Valley, because everybody documents Indus Valley at one plane. Nobody has been able to figure out the script of it, So it all is like, oh, that discovery, that. But what is it? Really, nobody can say, So, but this one is better documented. It's
better documented because of language similarities, from all the way from, say, Meghalaya right down to Southeast Asia. The languages there is similarity between them.
It's a fascinating part of the world which we don't talk about much. Okay, we are coming towards the end of our session. There are 2 things we need to do. And one is, wherever you go, whatever language you speak or has come in, there is almost a universal anxiety about my language will die. Right? Recently, 10 years back when Metro came to Bangalore, they started putting signs in Hindi, major Kannada groups protesting, so like, why Hindi? It should be Kannada and English, like so. In Punjab, we know how big is anxiety. Tamil pride, Tamil identity comes from language, Sangam literature and all that. What is this about language dying, and how many languages are there? Are new formed? Do old die? What happens?
Languages die. One language dies every 3 months, roughly. That is a documented fact. Broadly, what linguists say is that when a language has less than 10,000 speakers, right, it is heading towards death. Because 10,000 speakers is a very small number, and depending on context, where they live and so on, chances are that this language will not be transmitted to future generations because frankly, people don't see value in the language. It is not the language of commerce, it is not the language of education, it is not the language of power. So then they just stop teaching the language. And that's how a language dies, right? And it's happening. It's happened, it continues to happen. So it could happen to other languages if these languages are not transmitted. So languages could die.
What does it mean?
What does it mean? It means many things, right? When you lose a language, you lose a way of looking at the world, right? You lose history. You lose, knowledge coded in the way that language is spoken, right? You lose a way of seeing things, For instance, the Eskimos have, I think, 20, 30 words for different kinds of snow, right? But there's no word which just means snow, right? We understand something as snow, but they have gradations. So obviously, it is coded, to teach them something about their everyday life, for them to negotiate everyday life. You lose that way of looking at the world. You lose, your unique worldview, and that is a tragedy. Now, I'll just give you an example from Punjabi. There is this old saying, right? Khada pida lahedi, baki Ahmad Shahedi. Now, so you're using this character from history, Ahmad Shah, to say that essentially, whatever you eat and drink is yours, the rest is Ahmad Shah's. Who is Ahmad Shah? Right? Why are you using him in this context? Ahmad Shah is Ahmad Shah Abdali, who came to Punjab many times, ravaged and pillaged the place, right? So what you're essentially telling people is, have fun today. God knows Ahmad Shah might come tomorrow. So you're coding a historical event, you're coding a certain worldview through the language, right? That will die. That memory of that historical event and what it did to people's psyches, that memory of, therefore, how to live your life, that certain worldview, certain way of looking at the world, that will die.
Food systems, healing systems,
absolutely.
Clothing systems.
It'll all be like McDonald's, the same burger everywhere in the world.
That's chilling, no?
It is scary.
And
it's scary.
But it is scary, but it's like I and you will also die. We just try to live in our lives whatever best we can.
But Ahmad Shah still lives through the language.
Yes.
And that's the difference.
Yeah. But it's a very sobering. So don't get too riled by languages dying. That happens. It's not something that, no political group should be at least able to milk your emotions on the basis of languages dying. If language is dying, then make efforts to keep the language going, keep the language, reviving the language, teaching the language, writing in the language, publishing the language, but just going and agitating is not going to help anyone, I think, personally. There was one favor I wanted from you, is that I love the subheadings of your chapters. And that will give everybody a run-up. We are almost time, right? Yeah, in 3-4 minutes. Yeah, so can you tell us why you chose those subheadings?
Would you like to read one or two? Ask me specifically about one or two?
No, I'll just read each one of them and then you tell. It's like
we'll just talk about 2, 3 since we don't have too much time.
We have time. Okay.
It's not there in the contents. You have to go to the pages.
I have to go to each this thing, no?
Yeah.
So I'll say it loud. By the way, you should also read the introduction. I'm coming to it last because it actually gives you an overview of, not only this book, but of the space that we know as language, and in the Indian context especially. the Tamil, the Dravidian pillar.
The Dravidian pillar. That's how I saw Tamil, really. Right? Tamil has been in the forefront of what can I say, establishing the fact that the Dravidian languages are older, are not older, are different from the Indo-Aryan languages. Establishing that as a fact, it took a long time to kind of figure it out. And Tamil language speakers have been very vocal about their linguistic identity, of vocal about Hindi imposition. And in some sense, it has served as a pillar for the South. In some sense, it has, I think, given the South a strong linguistic identity.
A Dravidian identity.
A very strong Dravidian identity.
Telugu, a language of melody.
When I always heard Telugu, and this was confirmed by people, Telugu is very musical, right? And it is called language of melody by others in South India. My mother used to use a specific term for it. I've forgotten what she used to use. But when the Italian travelers came, one of the Italian travelers who came and he heard Telugu, he said it sounds like Italian, very melodious. And he actually called it the language of melody. He was thinking of Italian, but he said Telugu is the Italian of the East.
Also, it was in a poem, in the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
This, we shall just drop it and move ahead. Bruhi.
Brahui.
Brahui. A slice of South India and Pakistan.
There is a Dravidian language in Pakistan.
No, we are not telling this.
Spoken, I'll give you a little more information. There's a Dravidian language in Pakistan, spoken as far away as Balochistan, on the border with Iran, right? And roughly 2 million people speak it still, right? And what can I say? It is one of those great enduring mysteries of that linguists always try to decipher. How did a Dravidian language end up being spoken there? And there are Brahui speakers even in Iran and in Afghanistan, little pockets.
Khasi, thriving in the hills.
Yeah, Khasi has come back, into circulation. It has been encouraged by the state of Meghalaya since the formation. So it has kind of come back into.
Kokdok we talked about in detail. But you look at this, how many types of scripts of the language, it's a very rich book. I think we should. Manipuri,
Jewel of the Northeast. I was playing on the word Mani, Manipur itself.
You didn't give one to Nagamis.
Yeah, I didn't give one to Nagamis. I couldn't find one evocative enough.
Marathi, bridging the north-south divide.
North-south divide, the existence of Tanjavur Marathi, or even the physical location of Maharashtra. And if you look at the Marathi alphabet, there is a L, which is found in Kannada and Telugu, right? Which is not there in the most of the other Indo-Aryan languages. So it is essentially a South Indian feature that features in an Indo-Aryan language.
Punjabi uniting India and Pakistan.
Yeah, Pakistan is often thought of as an Urdu-speaking country, which is actually not right. Pakistan is as Urdu-speaking as all of India is Hindi-speaking. 40% of Pakistanis are Punjabis, and many of them speak Punjabi, right? Urdu has official status. Urdu imposition is as much a point of angst amongst many Pakistanis as Hindi is in India. And Punjabi is spoken across both East and West Punjab. So in some sense, it could be a uniting factor.
And we should just put a hard stop here. If no questions come, we can engage you for 10, 15 minutes more, but we should wait. Hindi, a language with an attitude.
If you want, I can answer that question, but I won't.
Sorry, 1 second.
Thank you for the talk. My question about, I read about this village called Malna in Himachal. Apparently the language spoken there locally has no connection to any other language. And they claim to be descendants from
Alexander's army.
Can you just throw some light on the language spoken?
So this is something I've read too. Malana has many interesting things. Among other things, I think it grows a certain drug. I forget which one it is. Marijuana, yeah. And it is the purest form. Malana is also, I think, the world's oldest village republic. And this connection with Alexander's army is something I've read in many places. So it's perhaps not fair to say it does not have any relation with the other languages. See, Malana is very territorial, right? They discourage outsiders. They don't want to engage with outsiders. When outsiders come in, they're supposed to leave at a certain time. They're not supposed to touch certain things. So it's a complicated place, and I think the linguistic legends around it are part of the whole legend of Malana itself, including the fact that the language is unintelligible to other people and so on.
Including what I've heard that a few villages around the area cannot be found on any maps. So just
Lost villages.
no, don't allow technology to come in. You're
Oh,
safe.
okay. Like that.
Going back to the original point of the talk.
Interesting.
Hi, thank you. If you can throw some light on what printing did to writing Kannada and Telugu, because if you look at it, it's almost the same, but only and since printing came, this happened is what I
Actually,
understand.
Telugu script has diverged more from Kannada, far more than they were far more similar than they used to be. They are now.
No, they were actually very close. If you look at all
Exactly.
inscriptions in Hampi,
So
they're all
after
the
printing,
same.
actually, Telugu has made an attempt to kind of differentiate itself.
Itself.
Though, I mean, you
It's a
can broadly
very-
read Telugu if you know Kannada.
Yeah,
I mean,
correct.
it's not difficult at all.
True, true.
Certain words, maybe, certain letters actually. That's about it. So printing has helped Telugu kind of differentiate itself.
Very simple question. What languages were you tempted to bring in, but you had to leave out, and why?
Okay. With a stone on my heart, I left out Kannada and Malayalam. Right? I also left out Bengali. I also wanted to write about Assamese. I would have brought in Bodo. Right? Yeah, I would have definitely brought in these 5 languages, and I would have perhaps would have liked to write on Sinhalese as well, because Sinhalese is very interesting. Sinhalese is further south, right? It's beyond the Dravidian territory, but Sinhalese is an Indo-Aryan language, which goes back to the Pali of the Buddha himself and the Buddhist scriptures that followed. So so essentially, the Dravidian language family is a language family isolate. Right? You are surrounded by Indo-Aryan languages to the north and to the south. Even Maldives speaks Divehi, which is also like Sinhalese. So yeah, I would have definitely liked to bring in Sinhalese and some of the other languages I said.
Just curious as to what language is spoken by the various tribes in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
That's a lovely question. So Nicobar is Nicobarese. Nicobarese is an Austroasiatic language. It's about 6 languages. The Andamanese language family is a separate family. It's the 5th Indian language family. It was identified roughly about 20 years ago. There are about, I think, 5 or 6 languages. Onj is a Andamanese language. Jarawa is another Andamanese language. Sentinelese probably is, but Sentinelese are uncontacted, right? So you don't know actually what they're speaking, and the government of India does not allow contact with the Sentinelese. And the Great Andamanese is definitely, another language. And there are about 4 or 5 Andamanese languages and Great Andamanese languages. So it's a separate language family on its own with 50 speakers left. That's it, The last native speaker died 10 years ago. The people who are alive can speak it as a 2nd or 3rd language. So it is a language on the verge of extinction.
I have 2 questions. Which are the languages here out of the 10 highly influenced by Sanskrit?
Okay. Now, see, Sanskrit has influenced the vocabulary of Dravidian languages as well. It's not influenced the grammar, right? The Indo-Aryan languages all go back to Sanskrit. Both in grammar as well as in vocabulary.
The next question is not directly related to language, but these days, artificial intelligence is getting so many prominent stages. Are we human beings losing common sense?
See, the way I see artificial intelligence now is the territory of artificial intelligence is like the Wild West. which you see in cowboy movies, unmapped, uncharted, and unruled for the moment, right? Everyone's doing whatever they want to do. Eventually, I think there will be regulation, there will be fixing of boundaries, there will be, I don't know, some attempts to kind of figure out what artificial intelligence can do and what artificial intelligence cannot do. Then I think we can answer that question better if we have our common sense till then.
Anyone else? Okay, there is a bonus chapter in your book on Brahmi.
Yeah.
So why that? And the one language I didn't see in the book is Pali. I mean, like, why is Pali not here?
No. So Pali is mentioned indirectly, not directly. Pali is a Prakrit, right? So the road from Sanskrit to the modern Indian languages, it comes through Prakrit, Apabhransh, and the modern Indian languages. And Prakrit is one word, and we think it's one language. It's actually a number of languages. Shaurasaini Prakrit gave birth eventually to Punjabi, Maharashtri Prakrit to Marathi and Konkani, Magadhan Prakrit to the languages of Bihar and Eastern UP and so on. Pali is a Prakrit. Pali and Ardhamagadi, they are both Prakrits. So yeah, so I didn't mention Pali by name, but I mentioned Prakrit.
Yeah, but no, Brahmi, we were talking about the chapter.
The Brahmi script, yeah. The Brahmi script is, I think, a wonderful invention of India. All Indian scripts go back to Brahmi, right? Marathi, Kannada, Tamil, all of them, on all the North Indian languages as well. It has also influenced Sinhalese, Thai, Lao. It goes up to the Philippines. There was an old script called the Bebein in Philippines, which is also derived from Brahmi. Javanese, old Javanese was derived from Brahmi. So it's a meta script of South and Southeast Asia. All the scripts kind of flow through Brahmi, flow from Brahmi, actually.
Is it time almost? I have one last question to you. This is nothing to do, everything to do with the book. Karthik, you have sat on hundreds of stages and spoken, brought hundreds of writers into the world, right? You have written hundreds of articles for newspapers, right? How does it feel to have your name on a book? And how does it feel to sit as the author of the book?
I thought I was immune. I thought I'd seen it all, but I realized there is a certain excitement. When I see my book there and my name on it, it does feel extra special, right? And I'm glad I actually did this. I wasn't very willing to do this for a long time, but somehow when the call came, it came very strong, and I'm happy I got a chance to write on something that I deeply enjoy reading and writing about. So I'd say right now I'm feeling very lucky.
And what next?
Yeah, so next we'll be writing a book that includes Bodo and Sinhalese and Nepali and other languages, perhaps a bigger version of this book. Yeah, I think that's the next step.
All the very best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think this was fantastic. Amandeep, that line that I will take away today is that you hold a fact, you tell a fact, and you dwell on a fact as a writer. That was fantastic. And Karthik, really lovely. And I was going to ask if there's another book which puts together all the languages that you have left out, but clearly there is one more. And is that also a young adult one? Or,
This is the young adult book.
Okay, all right. All right, so this is, thank you so much, speakers. It was a fantastic panel.